So our Brit Chadashah, or New Testament reading today, ends with, "Be at peace with one another." And in the Torah portion, we read about the potentially spreading disease of Tza'arat, which is biblical leprosy. So I'm not going to talk about Tza'arat today. I'm going to talk about something else that's contagious, and that is your words and attitude. Have you ever worked in a job with somebody who had a contagious bad attitude? They hated coming to work. They hated their job. They talked badly about the employer, sharing their negative opinions about them and how other employers were so much better. Person by person, that negative attitude began to spread through the workforce. As I was reading the Torah portion this week, I was noticing some parallels between Tza'arat, which is contagious, and a contagious negative attitude. And a couple of things that I thought is, I was reading about how sometimes when somebody had, it came up and they weren't sure if it was Tza'arat yet, they set them aside for a week and then checked again, and maybe set them aside for another week and checked again, and then made their diagnosis. And same thing, sometimes a wound or a burn started looking like it might be leprosy, but they weren't sure yet, so they set them aside for a week and rechecked. And sometimes we might look like we have a contagiously bad attitude, but we just need a week or two of solitude. Sometimes we've got some stresses on us and we're coming out with a grumpy attitude. Sometimes we've been hurt by something. We've got a wound, we've been burned, and we come out sounding like we have a bad attitude, but it's not a long-term contagious disease. We just need somebody to set us aside for a week or two before you make a decision that, wow, this person has a really contagious bad attitude. Sometimes there's a little grace for that healing period where you're not sure if is this just healing or is this actually long-term bad attitude. I was reading, I was like, it sounds really nice. If I was grumpy and somebody just kind of gave me a week by myself, that would be really nice. But then sometimes people keep their contagiously bad attitude, and it doesn't matter whether it started by some unseen reason like stress, or it came from something something bad happening. When people keep that bad attitude and it starts becoming bitterness and it starts becoming a long-term contagious, drag everybody down bad attitude, they've become like a rotten apple. You put a rotten apple in a barrel of good apples and it spreads the rot through the whole barrel. And that's kind of how that bad attitude becomes when you start hanging on to your bad attitude. So I was reading all that in the Torah portion, and then went over to the Haftorah in Isaiah. And it says, "The kind of person on whom God looks with favor is the one with a humble and contrite spirit who trembles at his word." And I was thinking, it's kind of hard to have a contagious bad attitude when you're humble. And it's kind of hard to have a contagious bad attitude when you're grateful. We just finished Passover, so we were singing Dayenu, where basically everything that God did for you, you say, well, if he'd just done this, that would have been enough. But he did more. And if he just did that, that would have been enough. But he did more. That kind of attitude, it's hard to have a contagious bad attitude if you're singing Dayenu. And then it's hard to have a contagious bad attitude when you take God's word so seriously that nothing else matters. So when I was reading about trembling at his word, that could mean a couple of things. That could mean just trembling for joy, because I've done that before, but also trembling to take it serious. It makes me think of a life or death scenario. If somebody's been through a life or death scenario, a kidnapping. If you've been kidnapped, you don't care whether your husband left dirty socks on the bed. That doesn't matter anymore. He doesn't do that, just so you know. Or if you're faced with a deadly illness, the fact that the computer was glitchy this morning really doesn't matter. All these little silly things that seem like a big deal, if you're in a life or death scenario, they don't matter anymore. And I kind of think about that same thing of trembling at his word. You realize, whoa, this is so important that the little things don't matter anymore. It sets your priorities to realize what's really important. And if you're realizing that, again, how can you have a bad attitude when you are trembling at his word? The Haftorah also says to those good people who tremble at his word, "Your brothers who hate you and reject you because of my name will be put to shame." Those brothers are like the people who kept their contagious bad attitudes. They're going to end up like those people with Sara'at that had to keep apart and cry unclean about themselves. They'll be put to shame. Then I turned and read to the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament portion, and the first thing it talks about is a reward for someone who gives even a cup of water to Yeshua's disciples because they come in the name of Messiah. And I thought that was an interesting contrast because in the Torah, it said those who are hating and rejecting you because of his name will be put to shame. And then immediately the New Testament portion I read said those who give even a cup of water to you because of his name will not lose their reward. The Brit Hadashah goes on to give a dire warning for those who cause one of these little ones who trust me to be ensnared, or some translations to say to sin. And again, you think about the contagiousness of your bad attitude. If your contagious bad attitude is causing other people to get dragged down, that's bad, and that's important to not do that. We all fall short of the mark, but if we're persisting in falling short of the mark and spreading it, becoming contagious to others, that's a big deal. He goes on to emphasize the gravity of the situation. He says, if your hand or foot or eye cause you to sin, like a rotten apple spoiling everything it touches, cut it off. And again, just like we talked about before, it sets your priorities right. If you're in a life or death scenario, it doesn't matter you've got to survive. It doesn't matter if you're blind in one eye or you lose a hand. It's so important to get to the other side. Sometimes when we have things that we don't see in our tangible real life, like Gehenna, where there is eternal suffering, you're so busy with seeing the things that you see, like, okay, this chair needs to go there, that chair needs to go here, oh my goodness, dinner's going to be late, and you forget the importance of what you're dealing with in the spiritual realm. And that's kind of what he's doing, is saying, this stuff is important, remember this is important, so focus on him and his ways. So I think we can prevent leprosy-type attitudes by having a humble and contrite spirit and by taking God's word seriously, like it talks about in the Torah portion. And then also by being at peace with one another, like it says in the Brit Hadashah reading. Love God, love people. That's what it's all about. And just don't hang on to those bad attitudes. Yes, if you've gotten hurt, it takes a little bit to heal, but don't hang on to it. What if we already have leprosy-like attitudes? What if that bitterness has already set in? What if we are already one of those contagious people that are dragging other people down? Well, again, give yourself a little grace. If it's a healing phase, it might look like a contagious bad attitude, but it isn't. Just take some precautions to not spread the nastiness. This isn't really leprosy. It won't last forever. And then I believe we can find things in God's word that will help cure our contagious bad attitudes. Seek him, seek his answers, keep seeking, and you will find them. And then I know Yeshua the Messiah. Do you know what he does? He cures lepers. And if he can cure lepers, he can cure your contagious bad attitude. And he tells his disciples to go out there and heal lepers. Not by our own strength. We're not sweet-talking somebody out of a bad attitude. We're not forcing somebody out of a bad attitude. We're not changing them by our incredibly magnetic personalities. We are doing it by the power of God, who is mighty to save. So when we're dealing with somebody who's got contagious bad attitudes that's persisting, we can go out in his strength, and just like he healed lepers, we can help bring healing too. And he's mighty. He can do it. If he can heal physical leprosy, he can heal your soul and your spirit too. So go forth this week in humility, taking God's word seriously, having salt in yourselves, being at peace with each other, and being ready to minister like Yeshua. And in every area of your life, at your work, in your home, in your friendships, at our congregation, see if you can be contagious in a good way. Like Hebrews 10:24, to spur each other on to love and good deeds. Shabbat Shalom.